So anyway, this piece is about the story of me discovering this beautiful music and finally managing to get my hands on it. Oh, shit. I'm at my mum and dad's house going through my old cassette tapes. There's approximately 200 lovingly stored in a large plastic box thrown in the corner in the loft. But there's one in particular that I'm after. It's got to be... I think it had gold writing on it. This is unbelievable. I need to sort these out. That was from 1988. Here it is. Here it is. Yes. In 1997, I started listening to a band called Mogwai. This was my first taste into anything other than straightforward rock, pop or dance. At first, I got off on the bone-crunching dynamics. Playing the music as loud as I could. To be taken further away by the big guitars and crashing drums. In time though, I realised it was actually the breathing space, the gaps between the notes, that lull, that had a way bigger effect on me. Anyway, one album led to another, and after going down a few dead ends, I fell upon 3 albums that pointed me in exciting new directions. Fridge's Happiness, Steve Reich's Music for 18 Musicians, and Frippinino's Evening Star. This stuff was less formed and drifted into experimental and what I'd later learn to be called ambient. I spoke to a friend of mine in Newcastle mentioning these exciting new, well, to me, sounds. And Jez sounded as excited as I did.
You know, it's a fucking man. Wouldn't make you a tape.
And make me a tape, he did. Side note, he also packaged the tape so big that it didn't fit through my fucking letterbox. So once I'd recovered it from the main post office, I took it home and I put it on. Fender Rhodes and some tape hiss. I used to listen to it on my walk home from a pub job I had. The 3 miles walk from Tilsley back to Neighbury and Atherton, over the ear headphones, the vast night sky above, past the fields that connected the two places. It was all a bit much. So, in way of reciprocation, I sent a tape back Newcastle way. A week after, I got a phone call from an unexpected source. An ex-girlfriend who lived with Jez had called me to tell me that Jez had died. I hung up the phone. This tape's a fucking masterpiece, by the way. Even more so when I listen to it now. Now I know what most of this stuff is, but at the time I only had bits of information in a pre-internet age. Now, I find myself saying this a lot, but sometimes we forget what it was like to have very little information at your fingertips. Jez, very interestingly, didn't put a complete track list in. And obviously, I couldn't ask him what the tunes were now, could I? Some tracks just had... Well, I'll tell you what, here's an example. Track 10, Best Queens. Now, I now know that this song is Girl Boy Tom from the first Desert Sessions album, so there's a Queens of the Stone Age link. Not directly them, but, you know, in the area. So that kind of gives you a level of where we're at. More cryptically, track 19 is a small drawing of a cube. I've fucking no idea why this denotes Für immer off Neu 2. But it did. There are 2 tracks called Verve, and both of them more straightforwardly from the Verve's first album. I think one's a B-side, actually. So you get the picture. This isn't an exhaustive list, and Jez just wasn't that kind of guy. But most infuriating of the lot, top of this piece of paper, was track 1. I fucking love track 1 pretty much more than anything I'd listened to in my life up to that point. And all the information I had was 1. Water copy. It was around this time that the first internet cafes were opening up around Manchester, and they were fucking brilliant places, opening up the world of the net to the masses without costing the earth. Christ, that should have gone into advertising. Anyway, the one I used to use was just off St Anne's Square in town, and for a couple of quid you could get 3 hours or so browsing time. And it was here, one Saturday, I decided to decipher Jez's tape cover. Now, most of the tunes, even off the little information I had, fell into place quite quickly. It was the instrumental ones, obviously, that took a bit longer. And it took me years to work out Für immer from a drawing of a cube. Water copy, track 1, took a lot longer. About 12 years longer. But when I did get there, it would open a beautiful world of Japanese ambient music. Turns out Water Copy was the first track off an album called Music for 9 Postcards by a bloke called Hiroshi Yoshimura. I even had a picture of the cover. It existed! I discovered the album was released in 1982 and pretty much didn't make it outside Japan. Thus, it was rare as hen's teeth. But at least now I could listen to it. And boy, it was better than I could have ever expected. Clean, achingly minimal and glorious. The mix of Fender Rhodes and piano remains intact pretty much all the way through. Now, in fairness, this could have palled, got boring very fast, but so crafted are the 9 pieces of music, it doesn't. Everything is perfectly spaced, perfectly assigned. Obviously, this become like top 3 must-have records. The thought of owning it, tempered by me searching Discogs a few years later and finding the average price of copies sell for around about £425. I could dream, I thought. I could dream. In 1980s Japan, a group of artists were quietly producing what we might now recognise or describe as ambient or even new age music. Hiroshi Yoshimura, Midori Tadaka, Satoshi Ashikawa and peers were crafting perfectly poised, minimal landmarks. Yoshimura identified his work as environmental music, the Japanese translation of ambient, but one that framed it in a new context. Where Brian Eno was creating ambient music for an imagined environment on, say, music for airports, Yoshimura and his contemporaries were creating music for specific, tangible locations.
I suddenly thought of this idea of making music that didn't impose itself on your space in the same way, but created a sort of landscape that you could belong to, you could be part of. And this, I called this, I pompously gave it a new name, which I called ambient music.
I composed music for 9 postcards, whilst catching the waves of scenery out of the window and feeling the sounds form. Images of the movement of clouds, the shade of a tree in summertime, the sound of rain, the snow in a town. With those rather quiet sound images, I sought to add the tone of an ink painting to the pieces. Yoshimura there on the composition of 9 Postcards. The finished piece would be piped through the Hara Museum of Contemporary Art. Yoshimura was taken by the then new converted building when visiting in the early 80s. 9 Postcards was played near the large windows that gave expansive views over the Shinagawa area of Tokyo. Understandably, well from my view anyway, when people heard the music surrounded by the views and the clinical architecture, they wondered where they could buy an album of these sounds. So, to sound process. A label established by Satoshi Ashikawa was set up to put out music for 9 Postcards, branded as Wave Notation 1, with the operation quickly growing not just into a record label in its own right, but into a sound design consulting firm. Ashikawa released his own chillingly beautiful album, Wave Notation 2, Still Way. Its liner notes, written by Ashikawa himself, read like some kind of manifesto for his and Yoshimura's vision of environmental music.
Background music, which is supposed to create atmosphere, is far too excessive. In our present condition, we find that within certain areas and spheres, aspects of visual design are well attended to, but sound design is completely ignored. It is necessary to treat sound and music with the same level of daily need as we treat architecture, interior design, food, or the air we breathe.
Not long after the release of Wave Notation 2, Ashikawa sadly passed away. Virtually unknown outside Japan until relatively recently, these records are only just making themselves known and gaining wider approval. In particular, music for 9 Postcards. Love for the music, love for the artifact, the thrill of the chase. These are the 3 elements that will drive someone to hunt down a piece of wax and spend their hard-earned on it. Like finding a holy grail, stumbling across Roman coins with a metal detector, or even just finding a last tea bag when you thought you were out. Every Sunday morning, I'd fill up a cup full of black tar coffee, tip it down my throat while I lazily typed in the usual list of albums that I typed in, mainly just checking for changes in prices. But also, you never know. One might be out there. This could be the Sunday after all. So, bit of black coffee. Oh fuck, that's still hot. Transglobal Underground on. Let's go. Into the heart of Love Nothing. Underwater moonlight. Bollocks. Music for 9 Postcards. Wait a second.
Tell this to everybody wherever they are.
American-based label Light in the Attic, who focus heavily on releasing quality reissues as they do new talent, had reissued music for 9 Postcards. This is some brilliant fanfare music, really nailing my feelings. I was almost paralysed with excitement. Seriously, I am not over-egging this, as sad as it sounds. And I immediately found the contact details for the label, and I rang them. They're based in Seattle, and it took me about 14 rings to realise it would be the middle of the night over there. Fucking helmet.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
A few days later, they replied to my follow-up email. Sadness theme. I see what you're doing here. Unfortunately, the import cost was so exorbitant that the price had inflated from $30 to what exchanged up to about 85 quid. Sheesh. I mean, it was cheaper than 400 odd pounds, but I had to eat. The guys at the label were so fucking helpful, but said contacting a Euro distributor would be the best way to go. I don't know. I mean, I was pretty fucking crestfallen, as the music we're using for a bed is signifying. I think the surprise and happiness of actually having this record that I've wanted for so long within my grasp had just sucked all the energy out of me when I found it was going to be so near yet so far. And where was I going to find someone who distributed records in Europe? Well, this pretty much proves that disappointment had done something to my brain, because it took me around 15 minutes for it to dawn on me that I'm in a band signed to a French record label with Belgian distributors. Pass me the phone! So let me just keep you up to speed with what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Basically, once I'd regained my mind, I rung Flo at Specific Records in Metz in France immediately and told him the kind of semi-predicament, to which he replied, right, I've just found it on my database. I'll send it out to you in 3 days. Simple as that. 17 years or so. Yeah, 17 years or so. Waiting, trying to find this record. Learning about it, listening to it, falling in love with it. And all it took was a Frenchman and 3 or 4 clicks of a mouse. 20 minutes ago, I went to the post office and picked up the parcel, which I knew exactly what it was. Like a kid at Christmas, like a toddler opening his first present from his pauper-like parents, I legged it back and I opened the record and was confronted by, in big 12-inch by 12-inch size, that artwork, that cover, that thing that I honestly never thought I'd lay my hands on. And that feeling washed over me that any person who is serious in collecting, not just records, collecting anything, came over me of deep, deep satisfaction, almost tearful. Seriously. Genuine happiness over something that is, in many respects, completely inconsequential, but is so incredibly important because it's entwined as a part of you through various threads of stories that I've taken you through from the late 90s to the early part of this millennium to the present day. Just a thread of many stories that makes us up, but as important as the ones that on the surface are important. And I can't thank Flo enough for that. I wrote some rambly, over-emotional perhaps Facebook post that at that very time when I was typing it, I meant every fucking word, and probably still do now, and probably always will. And that's what music does to you, really, doesn't it? So, I got to admit, when what I don't talk about in the piece was when that record landed, when it came. And Jem actually texted me when I was at work saying, it's here. And I think I did something quite un-me-like, and I've got a picture of me on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, I do remember this. Actually,
and I remember thanking Flo so much. It was worth it as well. That's because we mentioned previous to the piece about erotica, and you were like, well, I'm not really that arsed and stuff. But when you pined for something for that long, it was a moment. It was a proper moment. Yeah.